Welcome to another episode in my automation series. And in today's episode, I'm going to show you how to create your very first own playbook. Now, here are some timestamps for those who cannot wait and want to jump ahead. Now, let's get our coffee ready and dive in. I'm Garrett, and this is Timmertag. We are going to create our very first playbook today. Now, before we get to that, we first need to cover a few topics. And these topics are what is YAML, the Ansible documentation, the template I'm using, the process how to solve your problem, playbook execution order, and then we are going to create our playbook. Now, I'm going to try to keep these first topics as short as possible. So I'm only going to talk about the basics so we can get started on writing our playbook as soon as possible. Let's dive in. So first on our topic list is what is YAML? Well, YAML is the format of the files and the structure that we will be using. Now, I'm not going to go in full depth into this because I actually create a video for that and you can watch that here. Please watch that first if you have never worked with YAML so that you understand the basics about the syntax and how you have to write it and how you can read it. So that is all I'm going to say about the YAML. So please watch this video. Next up on our topic list is Ansible documentation. Now, I'm quickly going to go through this. This is just to help you guide you through all the reference material. So let's jump to the Ansible documentation. So all the Ansible documentation you can find here on docs.ansible.com. Now, Ansible comes with a lot of built-in modules, things you can use for executing tasks. In order to find which one are included, you have to look for the Ansible core documentation. And you will find that here at the top, Ansible core, and then you go here to Ansible core documentation. Here you can read a lot of stuff and literally everything about Ansible, how playbooks work, roles, Ansible Galaxy, community stuff, everything is here. So if you need something or you want to have more clarification, use this reference material. It will help you out. Now, when it comes to the built-in modules, most of the time it is as simple as writing or searching for what you want to achieve. For example, you want to reboot a server? Well, you just search for reboot and here you find it. A Ansible built-in reboot module. This is just to show you that it will give you a description, a synopsis about what this module does. In this case, reboot a machine, wait for it to go down, come back up, and respond to commands. And it has a lot of options. Now, I'm going to show you how to use all of this when we create a playbook. But for now, just remember, the Ansible documentation is there to help you. Now, our next topic is the Ansible template that we will be using. So I created this awesome Ansible template that you can use to get any Ansible project started in a few seconds. And that is what we're going to be using. You can get my template on github.com/ggrtimmer/ansible-template. And this is the template that we will be using. Now, I also created an amazing video about this template, how to set it up, how to get started, and it comes with an amazing playground, which we will be using in this video. Now go watch this video, grab the template and come back so we can write our very first playbook. So we're almost there on starting to write our own playbook. Now, before we get there, there are two more things we need to talk about. We're going to talk about the process and then about playbook execution order. So first, process. If you want to automate something, it's important that you understand what you're going to be automating. And in order to do that, it's best to follow a simple process because you're automating and you're solving a problem. So my recommendation is, if you want to do this quickly, use Kitlin's law. So Kitlin's law, for those who are not familiar with it, simply states that by writing out a problem, you have solved half of it. Now, if you want to automate something, the best way of doing it is to quickly write out what it is that you want to automate, what it is that you want to achieve. Just writing that down will greatly help you quickly build and structure your automations. That's it. Just write out first what you want to achieve and everything will go a lot faster. And you actually focus on what you want to automate. Now, that being said, very short, very simple. Finally, playbook execution order. Playbooks are executed in a certain order, which is for Ansible very simple. Top to down. It will just execute tasks in order. Now, the thing what you need to understand about it is that it will execute a task for all servers that it is targeting and then move on to the next. Now, you can make a few changes to this with certain options, but this is the overall execution order of Ansible. It goes from the top and it goes down and will execute each task for the targeted servers and then move on to the next. And if a task fails, it will take that server out of the targets and continue. So let's say you are targeting 4 servers and one task fails on one of the servers, then the next task will only be executed against the 3 working ones. That is the most important thing to understand. There's a lot more information about it. I suggest you read the Ansible documentation on it, but you need to understand Ansible executes in order, top to down, and each task will be executed to all targets before it moves on. Now we covered all the basic topics. Let's create our very first playbook. We are going to create our very first playbook. So I'm going to jump to my Visual Studio Code and get started on that one. And here we are. Now, I already preloaded my Ansible template, but I did not switch over to my playground yet. So let's do that first. We're going to go with the command palette, which is Command-Shift-P for Mac and Control-Shift-P for Windows and Linux. And we're going to say switch container, and we're going to switch to the playground. Well, it should take a few moments to set up, and here we are. Now, let's get our playground up and running, and that would be playground start. Install playground inventory. Yes, sure, we're gonna use this as a setup. And everything is up and running. That was pretty fast. I might have prepared in advance. So we're gonna clear the terminal. And we are going to test if we can reach our test server. So that would be Ansible. Let's target all servers. The reason I can do this is I just installed the Ansible Playground inventory. So Ansible all, and we're going to say module -m for module, and I'm going to do a ping to the servers. And let's make this a little bit bigger. And here we are. All 3 servers, we're able to reach them. Let's create our playbook. As I said before, let's write down what we were going to do. So I'm going to create a reboot template. So what we want to achieve is we want to achieve reboot all servers. So what do we need? Well, we want to reboot. Anything else that we need? Well, I just realized that while I was making this, that if I commit this, and maybe there are ways that when somebody clones this repository, they want to put in their own stuff, or before reboot do this and after reboot do that. Well, you know what? But if I put that in, then it will only be my preferences. Maybe you're using some different settings, or you're targeting Red Hat servers instead of Ubuntu. So you have different commands or different modules you want to run. So let's make this more universal. So what we're going to do is I want a pre-reboot. Yeah, I want a pre-reboot. I also want a post-reboot. And I want this to be dynamic. So I want the playbook to be separate of these additional tasks. Well, it is possible. I will figure it out because honestly, I did not prepare any of this. I was trying to get this video done and I did not really prepare anything in advance for creating this playbook. So I'm doing this basically top of my head. So yeah, we're gonna do pre-reboot, then we're gonna do the reboot, then we're gonna do post-reboot. We're gonna make this dynamic. So we're gonna do this in a way that dynamic. And what we want is, we want this to be, let's say, yeah, we want this to automatically load a file with tasks if present. Let's keep this open and let's get started on our playbook. So cool. So just playbooks, new file, call it reboot.yaml. And here we are. And we're going to do 3 dashes, new document, and save. In order to start a playbook, it's very simple to understand. Everything in Ansible, it starts as a list because, as I said before, on the execution, it executes tasks in order. So it's just like a list and it goes from the top to the bottom. So we're gonna start with a dash YAML list. We have a name and call this reboot the server. Now what we need to do is we need to tell this playbook who are you targeting. And there are a couple of ways of doing it. What we could do, for example, you do this with the key hosts. That's are the hosts that you want to target. So, and of course, you have to indent because, hey, we're still, as you can see here, in this list. So this is all still one item. And if we go into our inventory, we see that we have a group called nodes. Okay, so we want to target all nodes. If we would continue on this, this will work, but it might not be the best approach. And here is why. Because what we're dealing with is sometimes we do not want all the nodes. We might want to limit, hey, use this, or I only want to target these 2 servers. And that's possible. So we kind of want these hosts to be dynamic. When it comes to Ansible, there are a lot of what's called magic variables. These variables are included in Ansible and you can just use them. Also, what's important to know is what I said earlier on the execution. It executes a task for all the targeted hosts and then continues. That also means that this playbook will be executed at the same time for each server. So we have the magic variables. I know a few of them because I have been using Ansible. You can actually read the documentation and get more information on that. But what I want to achieve is I want my playbook to respect the command line option -L limit. Ansible also uses something called Jinja 2 templating. And that means that in these templates, you can do all kinds of magic stuff. It takes some time to get used to it. It also takes a little bit knowledge about how the magic variables work and what information is in there, but it's not hard to figure out. What you need to understand is that Jinja templating starts with double curly brackets. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start a string. I'm gonna do double curly brackets. Hey, this is a Jinja templates. And in here, Ansible will first do some calculations of what I tell it to do, and then it replaces values, access variables, etc. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the magic variable called Ansible limit. And this variable will be filled with the value from the command line from -L. However, if I do not use -L in my command line, stuff will break because, hey, there is no value. So what we can do is we can do a pipe and we can say, well, we can give a default. And in this case, I'm going to say nodes. What's happening here? It will use Ansible limit first if I give that on the command line, or it will switch over to default, and the default value will be nodes. So if I do not give any option on the command line running this playbook, it will run against all the nodes. What else do we need? Well, there are a few more variable and options, and here's a trick. In Visual Studio Code, you can actually use command space. It will say loading and it will load the auto completion, and for some unfortunate reason, it's not really loading. And my template actually came with full auto completion. So that's kind of a bummer that that's not working while I'm recording. So let's see. Next one. The next one is an important one, and that's called gather facts. This option tells Ansible if it should connect to the server first, gather a bunch of information, and then continue. Now, by default, this is on. However, there are sometimes reasons for you to turn it off, where you simply want to execute without gathering any information, maybe because Python, which is required for Ansible to work on a server, is not installed yet. So in that case, well, you don't want to gather any facts because you get errors because Python is not installed. Then you can have a playbook where it says, I don't want to gather any facts. I want you to execute this raw command that installs Python, and then I will just run another playbook. So yeah, we are going to gather facts about these servers. And what else do we have? Well, there are a few more things. So we are now defining the basic information of our first playbook. And in one playbook file, you can have multiple. Everything is executed top to bottom. Well, you can say, for example, tags. Tags are a way of tagging certain blocks in a playbook so that you can use on command line the tag option and say, hey, just run this part. And that allows me to skip the first part. I'm not going to go into full detail on that. The other option I'm going to show you right now, that is kind of an important one, and that's called serial. I'm not going to use it. I'm just showing you. The option serial will tell Ansible to change its execution order, and it will run against its targets in serial. So first node 1, then your second server, then your third, etc. There are sometimes explicit reasons why you need this. For example, when it comes to my TuringPy project, I'm using it to flash one node, completely run the entire playbook for one node that flashes the OS to the node, and then move on to the second node. Because I said before, by default, it executes one task for all the hosts, and then it continues to the next task. Serial allows you to complete the entire thing for one host and then move on. Or say, hey, do it for 2 servers at a time. I'm not going to use that for rebooting, but you know it's there. And you can actually now look at the documentation and get more information how to configure a playbook. Now, there are several things what we can do now. We can import roles. Now, I'm not going to tell you right now and show you how to make roles, but I'm quickly going to tell you about them. Roles are ways of compartmentalizing. What do I mean with that? Well, say that you have a role that configures a server as a web server. You're giving the role web server to a host, or you're giving the role, I want you to be a database server. Right now, we can say, hey, I want you to include these roles and just provide a list of roles that you want to include. These can be roles created in your roles folder, but also roles from Ansible Galaxy from the community you have downloaded. Another option what you have is block. That's more detailed, not going to go into that. But we are going to go with tasks, which means that we're going to define our reboot task in the playbook itself. So let's go with tasks. Well, tasks is just a list of actions that we're going to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a task called, and just call it reboot the server. We are defining a task. And a task uses a module to execute whatever it needs to do. So earlier I showed you there was a built-in module. Now let's see, we have a red line. No module action detected in task. Well, yeah, that's true. We don't have a module configured. So let's jump in because this is all part of one block. Let's call this, here, reboot. And auto completion, Ansible built-in reboot. Cool. Now it jumps in It does that, and that allows you to configure the parameters you saw in the documentation earlier. It gives me a few suggestions. So it actually gives a reboot timeout. So very slow old servers, you can actually change that. When it comes to most of the built-in modules, you can just press Ctrl space and it will give you the list of options for this specific module. So pre-reboot delay, there's actually documentation for each option, connection timeout, message to display to users before reboot. Oh, okay, that's cool. Dimmer tag issued reboot. And let's save this. The syntax line went away, meaning everything is good. Cool. Does that mean it works? Well, we can actually test it out. So earlier we started our playground. We can actually test out our playbook. Let's see if this works. So I installed Ansible Playground inventory, so I can use the normal command. So that's playbook. If not, you have to use the Ansible Playground playbook command if you want to keep your own inventory intact. Please watch my video about this template. It's awesome. So Ansible Playbook, and we're gonna say, well, let's do all the nodes, and we're gonna say playbooks reboot. Here, gathering the facts, it gets all the facts, and it did not work. Well, that makes sense because these are Docker containers. They're hard to reboot. We cannot do that. So that was not what I intended. I forgot about that one. So let's do something else. Let's see. Maybe update the server. That's cool. 14 packages can be upgraded. Great. Let's do that. So log out, clear. Well, let's rename our playbook. Quickly done. And we call this upgrade. Upgrade the server. I'm just gonna quickly rename all of this. Okay, now what we need to do is we need to change the module. So we're using Ubuntu and Ubuntu uses opt. So there is a built-in module opt. Now let's see what we're gonna do. We are gonna update the cache. So that's Ubuntu opt update. Yes, we want that, certainly. And the upgrade type is dist. And we'll actually run that instead of only upgrade, actually runs dist upgrade, which means it will replace packages. Auto remove. I'm just going to use the auto completion here. Auto remove. Yes, we want to remove obsolete packages. And afterwards the auto clean. Sure. Let's do the whole thing. Do we want to force apt-get? Yes, we want to use apt-get. Absolutely. And let's make sure, because it has to run as root. So what we can do, we can do that actually on playbook level or on task level. You have an option become. There are a few default options, but yeah, become means use sudo and run the command as root. So let's run our playbook. Now, if you have kept your original inventory intact, you need to replace the Ansible Playbook command with Ansible Playground Playbook to run it against the Playground servers. But I installed the Ansible Playground inventory, so I'm going to use Ansible Playbook, playbooks, upgrade. Here we go. And it's running. Now, if we quickly would go before everything is done, I'm quickly going to log in, opt, get. Oh, it's probably already done. Too late. I tried to show you that Ansible that Ansible is running apt-get in the background of the server, but there were not many updates. So yeah, it's already finished. So as you can see, it upgraded the server. Everything is up and running. So if we would go into the server right now, let's go to that server, Ubuntu. We're in the server. Let's run sudo apt update. We're gonna update and we're gonna, all packages are up to date. And earlier we had 14, so our playbook works perfectly. Now we can still also continue. We don't have to do one task. We can have multiple tasks and it will continue the task. So in this case, I'm gonna say, you know what, let's put in after the upgrade, we want to reboot the server. So reboot the server like we started our playbook with. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna remove this. Why is this? So no, I don't want, why is it for some reason, it keeps auto completing what I really don't want. These new AI things sometimes are a real pain when it comes to auto-completion, which you don't want. So what I want it to become root for the reboot, and I am going to use the reboot module. I'm going to set a message, dimmer tag reboot. Now, here's the thing. I just, as I said before, I was not really going to go into use of tags, but it's hard to reboot the Ansible playground because they're Docker containers. So what I'm gonna do, I am gonna tag these jobs. I'm gonna say that we're gonna do tags and we're gonna call this, and we're gonna make a list that, by the way, those square bracket would be the same as a new indent and starting a list like this. And you can have multiple tags like debug, etc. So this is the same. So I'm gonna use the tag upgrade and I am gonna use the tag reboot. Now, here's the thing. Now we can actually select one of the things we want to do. So we can run the playbook, and if we say -t, and we're gonna say only run the tag upgrading server, and it should now skip the task reboot the server because that has a different tag. Hey, perfect. Now, if we would say reboot the server and we give the tag reboot, it will now only reboot. We will get an error because it's really hard and not possible to reboot Docker containers like a normal server. And it actually says play. That's because this is still called upgrade the server, reboot the server. Well, we expected that error. But that also means that we can now use this playbook for Docker containers and for real servers, because we can actually select what we want to do or not. What you also could do is start a whole new playbook section, like so, call this reboot the server, same kind of host, gather facts true, and the tasks, just copy this over, we have upgrade server. Now we're gonna move these tags to playbook level, and we're gonna do this for the upgrade too. Now here's the cool thing. Now we can actually separate, and we have this one upgrade playbook, and we can say, hey, if we want to only run the upgrade and do not restart, we just give it the tag reboot. If we want to do everything, we don't give any options. And we can use the same playbook now also to reboot the server. This gives us a lot of power and flexibility. And as you have just seen, tasks is a list. It's not limited to a single task. You can actually have here more tasks. You can actually use a module that's built into Ansible that import roles or import tasks from another file. And that gives you a lot of power and a lot of flexibility. We're almost done with our playbook, but we talked about process. Write down what you want to automate. And in this case, we also wrote down we wanted a pre-reboot and a post-reboot. So we want to have tasks included so that, hey, if I commit this to the repository, anybody can make changes, etc., without affecting their own environment. For example, somebody's using Red Hat, somebody's using Ubuntu. So something like this would solve it. So let's first save this. I'm gonna remove the tags, the reboot tag. Now we're gonna talk about what we need to do. Well, I just create a folder overrides. Okay, we're almost there. We wrote down we also wanted a pre-reboot task and post-reboot tasks. So we need to figure out how to include that. So let's start by saving this, remove the reboot tags. Okay, remove the reboot tags. Let's create a override folder called overrides. Okay, and now we need to think about a little workflow, because what if the file is not present? Because including a task file, hey, that's easy. You just use the include tasks module and you include another file. That's easy. But what if the file doesn't exist because users of this repository might not include it, or they don't have pre-reboot tasks to complete? So we need to be fail-safe proof. So what we're going to do is we're going to check if the file exists. If the file exists, then we're going to include it. Let's start by naming this check pre-reboot tasks. Okay. And we are going to use... Let's see. We're going to use the stat module for that, actually. And control space for autocomplete path. Cool. And now we need to give the task, this module, the path of our file. Well, when you run a playbook, you actually work in the playbooks folder. So it should be /overrides, and we're gonna call the file pre-reboot.yaml. Now, this module checks if things exist, and then what it does, it gives output. We need to register that output so we can capture it and we can use it. And you do that by the register option, and we call this pre-reboot. Amazing. So let's see if that works. So we are gonna run Ansible Playbook, playbooks, upgrade playbook. Well, I want to skip the reboot within the Docker containers constantly. So what I'm gonna do is I am just gonna give this the tag Docker, and then tag -t on command line tags Docker, and it says scattering facts, check pre-boot tasks, all green. Perfect. Now, how do we see what's in that output? Well, you can use the debug command for that. Pretty easy. With debug, you can inspect variables and print messages. So I'm just going to include debug. I'm not going to bother with all fancy stuff. I'm just going to say, hey, pre-reboot. Let's print that whole variable. Debug var. We do have to tell. It also needs to run for the dollar tag I'm giving on command line. Otherwise, it's skipped. And here you can see something interesting. Here you can see that the task check pre-reboot tasks, that task is actually run for each host, and that each host gets that variable registered. And here we have stat exists. That's what we're looking for. Does the file exist? In this case, it's false. You know what? What happens if we create that file? Pre-reboot.yaml. Just create the file, nothing fancy. And let's run it again. It still says it's false. That's unexpected. Overrides. Oh, of course. So right now, we're running this task on Ansible 1, on Ansible, on each playground server. But we want it to check our local host, our repository where we're working. So we need to delegate this task, not to run on the server, but on our local host. And you do that with delegate to. And that way you can delegate a task instead of running on the target to run it locally for stuff like this. So if we run it now, here you will see something interesting here. Check this task. And you will see that for each host, this task is not run on the target, on the host, but on localhost. And as you can see, stat exists is now true, and it found a bunch of information about that file. Amazing. So while we can keep the file over there, we can now simply remove this, and we're gonna create a new task, include pre-reboot tasks. And we're gonna do that by using the include role task module. There it is. Control space, we want to use the attribute file, and we're gonna say override pre-reboot.yaml. And in this case now, it will run always. It will always run, but we only want it to run if the file exists. And when you want to do conditions like this, you can use the key when. So when you're defining a task, each task has certain default properties like a name or delegate to, or become, where you want to run this task as root. One of them is also when. And when determines when the task is run. And here you can give a condition that is checked by Ansible. And in this case, we're going to use this variable here, and it's going to be .stat.exists. And that's it, because the value is already a Boolean. So when we're checking here, you can see it's already true. But if you really want to make sure, you can say, make this a Boolean so you can check true, false. Now it will only be triggered when this value is true. If you want to reverse something, you can actually use things like not true, right? Use false. But for now, let's see if this works. Pre-reboot stat exists. It looks like everything is green. Well, let's print oh, again, same mistake. I have to include the tags to ensure. And now you can see that the file has been included for all the hosts. Now let's make sure that we actually print something. Start new document. Let's do a print of a message. So we're gonna say name is pre-reboot tasks. It's gonna be a debug, and we're gonna print a message dimmer tag pre reboot. And we're also gonna include the tag Docker in this case. Otherwise, hey, because I'm deliberately using the tag Docker to make sure that we skip that reboot and we don't see that message constantly when we're targeting the playground. Dum. And here we go. Each host has now printed the message that we wanted. Now, for completion, we can finalize our entire playbook. We're just gonna copy paste this whole thing to complete our entire list of this section of our playbook. After reboot, we're gonna call this post, localhost, yes, docker, yes. The file is called post reboot. The variable will be post reboot so that we do not clash with the previous variable being used. Include post reboot task, then we have to update the when post reboot.exist is true, docker, and of course we have to include that file. Now we go back and we shall see that it will skip include post reboot task, skip, because the file didn't exist. Now, if we simply copy paste this file, we're gonna rename it to post reboot.yaml. Call this post, message will be post reboot. Now, here's the cool thing. We're not making any changes to our playbook. We just put the file in and run the playbook again. And as you can see, it now has been included and we have our post reboot message. We created our very first playbook. I covered actually more than I wanted. I hope you enjoyed all the technical details I shared with you. If you need more information, don't forget to check out the Ansible documentation. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this video in writing your very first playbook with some very cool features. Now, comment below if you have any more questions or you want me to focus on something. Like and subscribe. It really helps me out. And I see you in my next video. I am Garrett, and this is TheFatRat.